Continuing the Mike Gallagher show as the world continues to wait for what may or may not happen in Syria. And for those of us who are supporters and fans of folks like Senator Rand Paul, who say, wait a minute, are we really ready to go fight the world's problems? Maybe we're glad to hear that Cameron and even the UN of all entities are saying, cool your jets a little bit. What an honor it is, especially during this crucial time, to welcome back to the show the Honorable Senator Rand Paul. Senator, great having you back on the show. How you been, sir?
Very good. Glad to be with you.
Thank you. Senator, I mentioned your name. I keep invoking your name, your dad's name. You guys are criticized for being, I put the word isolationists in quotes. But I'm hearing from a lot of Americans who are saying Rand Paul, and certainly Ron Paul, have it right, that maybe we should proceed cautiously before we start intervening militarily in places like Syria. I've been thinking a lot this week about you and your brand of ideology.
I meet a lot of the young men and women who serve in the military. Many members of my family have, and I think about it on a personal basis. I think, is this something that I want my kids to fight in or that I would fight for? So when I ask myself about Syria and about the president's goals, you know what their goal is? And they've told me this. They said they don't use this word, but this is what they say. Their goal is stalemate. They don't want either side to win. They want to help, weaken Assad so somebody would come and negotiate. And I've told them, frankly, I'm not sending my son, your son, or anybody else's kid to fight for stalemate. That's not what America's about. We'll defend our country to the death. We will fight to preserve our freedom. And I've seen the young men who've lost their limbs in our wars, but I will not send them to war in Syria to fight for stalemate.
Well, and when people challenge you on that, or would challenge that conclusion, which I think is a correct one, we have to ask ourselves, how does the United States benefit here? What is the advantage? Who are the winners and who are the losers? And our critics will say, well, it's complicated and it's difficult. They're hard pressed to find an answer. I mean, who are the winners or the losers in this situation?
Well, it's uncertain. There are two great ironies you have to overcome. One irony is if you funnel weapons and you support the Islamic rebels, they may well be killing Christians. There's about 2 million Christians in Syria, and they side with Assad. That doesn't make Assad a good guy, but the Christians are on the other side of this battle. The other irony is you're going to be allies with al-Qaeda. I thought we were sworn to defeat al-Qaeda. You talk about intervention versus non-intervention. I am for intervention against al-Qaeda, and I was for going into Iraq to wipe out al-Qaeda. I'm glad we got bin Laden. All of those things are heroic things. But going in and siding with al-Qaeda, there's at least a 50-50 proposition that whoever comes out of the mess of Syria may well be worse than Assad.
Senator Rand Paul is with us here on the Mike Gallagher show. The other aspect of this Syria conflict that I keep asking, it's horrific anytime any civilians are killed by any means. I'm a simple guy, Senator. I'm having a hard time understanding why we should be, provoking Russia and China and perhaps putting Israel at risk over the deaths of a few hundred people because of sarin gas, when we know that literally tens of thousands of civilians have been slaughtered over the last couple of years, and that didn't get our attention.
Well, Eisenhower said that once the violence begins, you can throw out all plans. So the people who think that war is always simple and that we'll just lob a few cruise missiles in there and be done with it, one, it'll probably be ineffectual. We'll have beaten our chest, but we'll do nothing to change the outcome. But the second is, what if it does bring Iran and Russia into this war? They already are supplying Syria, but what if now they decide to bring in troops as well as supplies? Or what if they decide that we get in a naval battle there in the Persian Gulf?
Right.
So there are a lot of unknowns about this that people ought to weigh through the thoughts, because little wars can become big wars. Our pilots could be shot down. Some of our troops could be killed. And then, all of America swells up and says, we're not going to let anybody do this to that. But no one forgets that in the beginning we could have avoided it by not getting involved.
I saw a chilling account by a source, supposedly a U.S. intelligence source, who has told the media that the fact of Assad, or the assertion that Assad used these chemical weapons, is not a slam dunk thus far. Holy cow! Not a slam dunk.
I think we should have an investigation. I'm not on the ground. I don't speak Arabic. I mean, we got to really figure out exactly what happened. Now, some have said, well, these could have only been launched by a rocket. But, I saw two military experts interviewed yesterday on the evening news, and they both said that these could well have been captured and set off by the rebels. Pat Buchanan asked this question in an essay the other day, the Latin phrase cui bono, to whose benefit?
Right.
There's absolutely no benefit to Assad. There is definitely benefit to the rebels because all of a sudden the world comes rushing in on their side.
Right.
So there's a great deal of evidence that the rebels could have wanted this to happen. I don't know who did this, but the bottom line is we have to, one, ask if it's in our national security interest to be involved, but two, how do we go to war? The Constitution says we go to war by the Congress declaring war. We don't go to war from one person's arbitrary opinion. The president doesn't have the ability other than to defend the country in an emergency. The president is supposed to come present his case. He should have a joint session of Congress. He should come before us. They should lay out the details, and they should say, this is what we believe to be true, and here is the evidence. But so far we've seen none of that. They're just saying, oh, well, believe us. Well, after the last 10 scandals, you forgive me if I don't believe the president every time he speaks.
Yeah, I think your skepticism is forgiven. I mean, this is a stretch because a lot of people say Assad. I'm hearing this from a lot of listeners from all over the country. They're saying, wait a minute, this is not a guy who's characterized as stupid. Why in the world, how could he not anticipate the reaction if he were to do this? But, then again, it's hard to know. You start trying to parse this. Well, who's the general of this? What this side and this colonel and I had one expert on today say, well, the best we can hope for is that the moderate Muslims kill the extremist Muslims. Boy, that's a great cause to be rooting for. I mean, this is just such a mess. And I'm telling you, Senator, I hear more and more support. You keep going back to, is it in what's in our best national security interests? That's got to be the foundation, right? We have to ask ourselves, is this in our national security interests or not?
Well, the thing is when we try to decide who is friend and who is foe over there, imagine, there's now talk that 400 surface-to-air missiles are missing. Do you think that they're a danger to our pilots as well as a danger to Israeli pilots?
Right.
400 surface-to-air. Now they're talking about let's give them more surface-to-air missiles and we'll screen out the good guys from the bad guys.
Sure.
But we had a senator over there who may well have been appearing with some of the bad guys. I don't think it's quite certain who he was appearing with and having his picture taken over there. So really, it's not so easy. Even the people who profess to be our friends in Afghanistan, we've had at least 100 killings of American soldiers by Afghan allies who profess to be our friends, and then when we turn around, they shoot us in the back. Syria is much more chaotic, much more difficult. Our Joint Chief of Staff, Martin Dempsey, has also said it's increasingly difficult to tell friend from foe in Syria.
Let's change gears for just a moment. In the moments we have left, I know how busy you are, and we so appreciate Senator Rand Paul taking the time to join us here on the Mike Gallagher Show. Domestically, Obamacare. I've been pulling my hair out literally over this battle within the Republican Party, where there are a number of Republicans who seem not willing to do everything possible to fight against Obamacare. I guess the strategy is, well, let's just let it play out and let the American people get mad, and maybe they'll get mad, and maybe they'll elect the right representatives for a change. What do you make of this conflict within the GOP over the defunding of Obamacare? Why not sign on, and why not fight tooth and nail and go ahead? Let's have a government shutdown temporarily. Why won't some of these what's the battle here?
I have signed on to defund, and I'll do everything I can to stop Obamacare. I think it's a disaster. That being said, you're right, it requires a unified strategy by all Republicans. All Republicans need to be together on this. And because there's a division among Republicans, we've lost the chess game to begin with because we've had preemptive surrender on so many parts who just say, oh, we're not doing this. This is a dumb strategy. So the Democrats don't fear anything now. The only leverage we have is that we control the House of Representatives. But if we don't really use that leverage, then we have no power. What I've always said is we can't win everything we want because we only control a third of the government. But if you control a third of the government, you begin with what you want. If we want Obamacare defunded, If the Democrats won't agree to that, maybe we get somewhere in between. Maybe we make the bill less bad. But if we do nothing, we're getting the whole bill. And that's probably what's going to happen, is nothing. I'm still fighting, and I will fight with others. We're having a big rally in Washington the first week we get back to talk about how we defund Obamacare and why it's the best for the country. The thing people have to realize is Medicare is $35 to $40 trillion short. How do you fund Medicare when you've added a new entitlement on it? By taking money away from Medicare, it makes absolutely no sense.
I've got to ask you in closing, Senator, on a personal note, do you feel disrespected sometimes by your fellow Republicans who seem to just have utter disdain for your views? I never understand the hyperbolic reaction that many Republicans and people, pundits in my field, in my line of work, have for somebody like you, who I believe is enormously popular around the country with the people.
The interesting thing is it's a tug of war. You know, I lose sometimes in Washington. I've tried to end foreign aid to Egypt because that's what the law is, and I lose 86-13. But if you poll that question in Kentucky or anywhere across the United States, probably nearly 90% of people don't want to keep sending arms to countries that disrespect us, that burn our flag, that won't protect our embassy. And so I think the people are with the message, and I think they sense that in Washington. They sense that they're losing, and there is a struggle within the Republican Party. And I believe the grassroots of the country is with me on this, and those who believe that we should send good money after bad, keep shoveling it to dictators and despots around the world, I think they're on the losing end of history.
It just seems to me to be a battle between the grassroots and the establishment types. And I got to tell you, I'd rather be with the grassroots and with Senator Rand Paul. It's always great hearing your voice and getting your perspective. Please keep fighting the good fight, and thanks for spending some time with us here on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Thanks, Mike.
I'm Mike Gallagher. God bless America.